Hello guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how to start creating glitch art in Photoshop using some free textures and resources you can find from the Studio AAA website. Using the resources, terminology and techniques I'm going to talk about today, you are hopefully going to be able to take this stuff away into your own design process with a better understanding of replicating visual glitches in your own work. Obviously I have to say here right at the start, I don't have all the CRT equipment and circuit bending stuff, and whenever I share my work in this style on the internet, there is always like one guy in the comments who has a room full of like old TVs and nice cameras and stuff who wants to tell me that this isn't real glitch art. I don't really care about all that conversation and that stuff. Obviously not everyone can afford to have all that stuff in their room, not everyone has the space for it. This video is just going to cover how I've managed to achieve these effects with just the tools that I have available to me. So I'm going to work on these two graphics today. I'll show these on screen right now. I covered making this exact effect in the last video, which was all about dithering. So if you want to get something like this to start off with, go watch the previous video. The first one is just a blender render I did with a bitmap effect. And the second image is of Doja Cat from her Paint the Town Red music video. This dither effect and the full This dither effect and the full tutorial are available to download and learn for free in the last video. So to get straight into it, go to studioAAA.com, navigate over to the free section and come down here and you'll see VHS textures and scanner trash 2. So get the free versions of those. Obviously, if you get the full version, you're going to have way more options and customization for this effect, but the free version will work fine. If you need it, you can also grab Dithered if you're going to be following the tutorial in the last video as well. Take these through checkout. You're going to get emailed the download link and you'll also be redirected to a download link. So download and save things wherever you need to. I do also recommend creating a folder for this effect today because you are going to be creating like 3 or 4 other project files that you're going to need to work with to get this effect going. I've already got this one here. I'll be saving stuff in this folder. In Photoshop, I've got my nice dithered graphic open here. I'll just show you the before just in case you are curious. So that's the before and after for mine, and I'm going to drag all 3 free VHS textures into this PSD file, put them at the top, scale them up, and now bear in mind where you scale them now will impact the effect later on. I'm literally just going to do like the most default. I've just scaled them up right in the middle. I'm not moving them around or anything like that. If drag and drop doesn't work for you, by the way, you can go to file and place embedded. Don't use place linked, just use place embedded and you can place them that way. But now all I'm going to do is with this one, free VHS textures, Studio AAA 1, just that's the only thing visible. I'm just going to go file, save as, and I'm going to save it as VHS 1, and then I'm just going to repeat for the other 2. So that's all 3 of mine saved as PSD files. So bear in mind, I'm saving it in the same place I've got my dithered graphic too. So make sure you save it somewhere that you're not going to lose it, and don't just give it a stupid file name because you'll need this later. So do that to all 3 textures you've dragged in until all 3 are saved correctly. And then hide those layers and come down to your graphic. So there's 2 ways you can do this depending on like what you want your output to look like. If you want to add chromatic aberration to your work, then you can follow these next step. But if you are just wanting one color in your work, then you don't need this bit really. But I'm going to explain chromatic aberration the same way I explained dithering in the last video, so bear with me. Chromatic aberration is this effect I will show on screen right now. You might have heard people call this effect fringing or RGB shifting, but the proper name is chromatic aberration. Aberration just means distortion and chromatic just means color, so don't be intimidated or confused by like new terminology. It's just color distortion if you boil it down. Chromatic aberration is a real world effect. It's not like a filter gallery thing or just a graphic design thing. Usually chromatic aberration happens when you are looking at an image through a lens or a piece of glass that fails to focus all the colors into the same point. There's a bunch of reasons that it can happen, like lots of variables, the type of glass you're looking through, sunlight, time of day, the lighting environment, blah blah blah. That's the traditional definition of chromatic aberration, but we're working with glitch or like replicating glitches for this piece of work. So what we're focusing on is how chromatic aberration occurs in a CRT television or just an analog setup. Lucky for you, I am very dumb, so I can only really explain this part in simple terms, but in a CRT TV, you have these little things called phosphors. They are just little dots that are arranged in groups that emit red, green and blue light individually, and that's how a CRT TV emits colours. If you were born in the late 90s like me, you probably only saw this stuff when you were really young, but that's why you might feel like a little bit of nostalgia when you are looking at CRT effects that are done really well. Like I used to watch like old Pokemon and like the original Star Wars stuff. I would have as a kid seen that on like a CRT TV. You might also remember, if you are from the same generation as me, that you can really fuck up a CRT television if you put a magnet on it. We are getting into the bit that I'm like, I don't fully understand here, but that's because the CRT television uses a magnetic field to control how images appear on its screen. And obviously that's not perfect technology, which is why it was replaced by the types of screens we use now. So over time, as the technology inside the CRT TVs degrade, the magnetic field that's controlling the phosphors that I mentioned, so the dot, and how they react to light becomes imperfect. And that's how chromatic aberration kind of happens over time on a CRT television. If you Google it, you can find lots of people who have bought CRT TVs complaining about convergence, and people on like forums and stuff talking about how to get perfect convergence in a CRT television, because obviously they're all very old, what you can buy now. Maybe someone's making CRT screens right now, but not that I know of. Again, if you're a CRT television genius, I know that's just the like very boiled down version. You don't really need to know any more than that for this tutorial today. I just think the information is important because a lot of content about chromatic aberration in images talks about it in a photography context, which is not really useful for recreating like authentic looking glitches. And I think it's good to know the difference, because if you Google it, you are immediately just going to come across all of the photography terms and photographer context around chromatic aberration, which is not useful for us. So coming back into Photoshop, I'm now going to duplicate my graphic. So there are 3 versions of it. You can do that by just dragging your layer down to this plus button here, and then I'm going to rename my top layer just a letter R, middle layer G, and then the bottom layer as B. And then I'm going to right click on the R layer and click blending options, and then untick the G and the B, and then I'm going to go to the G layer, blending options, untick the R and the B, and then on the B layer I'm going to untick the R and the G. And then to make it even easier, just come back to your R layer, right click and click red on that list at the bottom, and then for the G one just click green, and then B just click blue. So now you can visually see which is which. So our image has not changed at all at this stage, and that's fine. I would recommend just saving regularly while we're doing this as well. Make sure you are, I'm on the VHS 3 thing now, so let me just, if you did the same as me and didn't save as copy, just go back to save and just save over whatever you initially called your graphic. Now at this point you can start moving these layers around to get an understanding of how you are going to control this effect. Let me zoom in a little bit. So if you just do it with your arrow keys, you can kind of see what you've done by removing the channels from each layer. Yeah, you can mess with that if you want, if you've never done this before, just to get an understanding of how this works. But I'm going to leave all mine just where they were, so the image is still just white where it was white before. And that's because I'm going to use displacement to create the chromatic aberration effects for this piece. Now, there's loads of different ways you can do this. If you literally do just want to do it with your arrow keys, that is fine, but I'm going to go over displacement now. And you might already be familiar with displacement in Photoshop, but I'm going to explain this effect to you using 2 terms, strength and scale. So strength will obviously refer to how strong your effect is, and scale will refer to how big or small the effect is. When I say the effect, I'm referring to the displacement. So starting with the R layer, I'm going to go to filter, distort and displace. Bear in mind that you're not going for anything crazy here. If this is your first time using displacement, I'd recommend just copying my settings this time, and then once we're done with the tutorial, it'll still be editable and you can go back in and mess with it as much as you want. But yeah, I'm just gonna go 6 and 6 for the scale values. This is a percent value. It doesn't tell you there. I don't know why they didn't put the percent symbol there, but yeah, this is a percent value you are inputting here. Leave your displacement map on stretch to fit. Doesn't matter what you put for undefined areas. And then if you are on a slow computer, you can untick the embed, but yeah, just leave it on if you can. So click OK, and then it's gonna have you navigate to a PSD file on your computer. Now this is where these textures come in that we saved at the start of the video. This is why I said, like, don't just name them something insane. But I'm just going to choose one to start with. So now you can see that the red channel has been distorted away from the green and the blue. Now here's when you're going to get into like the trial and error part of this effect. So if you wanted sort of more distortion from this, because you saved the PSD files individually before, if you open up the file that you just used to displace, which I've already done here, and just flatten the layers and then add a curves layer here and just pull everything up basically, so it's super exaggerated and like unusable as a texture. Like, go as mad as you want with it really, and then save that, come back into your original PSD and then double click on the displacement again, leave your settings the same and pick the same file again. You're going to be able to see that the effect is stronger. I know that's a weird term to use for this because it's still very subtle, but that's kind of the idea. If you continue to edit your displacement effects this way, rather than just going back into this displace menu and just upping these numbers, this is how you can kind of keep the effects subtle. So now that the red channel is done, I'm going to go to the green channel and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to leave it on 6 and 6, and then this time I'm going to choose the second PSD file that I saved, and then just for the sake of showing you it as well, I'm going to go into the second PSD file I saved, flatten it again. You don't have to always do this bit, but you can if you want to. Turn the effect all the way up, save it again, and then redo it again. You can repeat that as many times as you want really. Obviously for this one I am keeping it super subtle. You can go much further with it if you want to, but just for this tutorial I don't want to do anything crazy. I want to keep it subtle. So once you've displaced each individual channel, you can then carry on just editing it using your arrow keys. If you end up with like a pink line or whatever here on one side, you can just go over that with a shape if you want. I'll just do that now. So yeah, mess with that as much as you like until you've got a chromatic aberration that you like. Obviously zoomed in it's gonna look really exaggerated, but the idea is that when you zoom out, like, it's not all that noticeable if you are trying to keep this realistic. And bear in mind that you can just use all 3 textures you saved as PSD files with the exact same scale factors when you go to displace, or you can use the same PSD 3 times with like 3 slightly different scale factors. Just make sure your final image does have crossover where the RGB lines up. So don't do something like this, because then the image just becomes like totally unfathomable. It just stops making sense basically. Some other alternatives to displacement are literally just adding a 1 pixel Gaussian blur to your blue layer, then like a 2 pixel Gaussian blur to the green one and a 3 pixel to the red one, or essentially just applying 3 slightly different effects to the image's 3 channels. But once you reach something like this, group it all up and just name it RGB and then convert it to a smart object, and then duplicate that again. So you've got 2 layers, and then just name this top one W and then the bottom one B. With the W layer selected, just come down to blending options again and pull this slider in like here around the middle. Doesn't matter like where you put it to start with, and you'll see that what you've essentially done is cut out all the values below that basically. If you hide what's below it, you can get a better grasp of what you're getting rid of and cutting out. So the reason we're doing this is because we're about to add a glow effect to the image, because Photoshop literally has 0 real glow effects that actually behave how real world glow and emission effects behave. We need to create our own threshold control on our glow. By pulling this slider up, in a minute you're going to be able to control exactly which values are affected by the glow that we set up. So once again, going back to the real world example of the CRT television, if there is a part of the image where none of the phosphors or the dots are emitting light, then that part of the image is black and has no light, so it won't be glowing. The parts of the image where the phosphors are like emitting light, that's where you want your glow effect to exist. So convert the W layer into a smart object again, just to instance the threshold control to its own environment, and then change the blend mode to screen or lighten. Then come up to filter and go to blur. You can really choose any blur you like. You can even go into blur gallery and use one of those, but I'm just going to go with Gaussian blur for this one today. And even here on, if you look at the little Gaussian blur menu here, you can see here that it's only really glowing the aberration here, which is exactly what we wanted. There's not a lot of blue in here, so in a minute I am going to go and change my threshold value that I inputted to include more of the blue dots. But yeah, I'm going to just put it at like 9.2. It doesn't really matter because it's all still editable. So yeah, I'm going to double click on this smart object for the W layer and then just lower the threshold to have a little bit more blue in it. Control S to save, exit that, and then if we go to Gaussian blur again, you can see that the blue dots are appearing more frequently in this little preview. Again, like lots of trial and error here. Lots of this is just going to depend on what kind of source image you're using, but the only thing I would really avoid is box blur, because box blur just isn't, I don't think it looks very nice with this. But yeah, the rest of it's up to you. And then if you want to increase the intensity of the blur, just duplicate your W layer and edit the Gaussian blur radius again, or whatever blur you used, and sort of like just repeat as much as you like. And because this W layer is going to sync up to all of those Gaussian blur or blur duplicates that you've used, you can keep coming back in here and changing the threshold again and again and again. Just to make it clear, when I say threshold, other programs like After Effects or like plugins that you might buy that have a glow built into them, if you've used Eevee in Blender, on the bloom menu you'll see that there's a threshold value. Every glow effect outside of Photoshop pretty much has this threshold value, which is just you controlling which parts of your image between black and white are going into the glow filter. It's just one of my biggest issues with Photoshop is that it doesn't have one of these, which it just really does my head in. But yeah, you can get to customizing this as much as you want with your glow effects and the threshold now. You can probably tell if you watched the last dithering video as well, I really like to break things into like the terminology in my head that refers to like what I'm actually editing. So I like to think of glow as like radius, intensity and threshold. Radius controlled by the size of your blur effect, intensity controlled by the amount of times you duplicate the blur effect, and threshold controlled by the blending options layer that I just showed you a moment ago. Same with I explained the displacement like the same way with scale and strength. So just like keep those things in mind when you're editing your effect here, and I think that kind of puts you in the right direction to knowing what you're going to get out of it really. Just bear in mind that the more you put into understanding these effects, the more you can get out of them, and when you learn like the rules of where things come from and what you're controlling, it's easier to like break those rules and develop like your own style within this effect, if that makes sense. So to get on with it, at this point you have now got your chromatic aberration set up, you've got your glow set up, everything is in smart objects, so our overall image is still completely editable down to every single effect you've made today. And now you're going to start adding textures. So the textures that you added at the start of the video that are still in your Photoshop document, you can just turn those on and like starting with whichever one you want really, just start choosing the blend modes. So obviously screen and lighten are going to work if you just want to apply the texture like as is, but with some of these ones with a bit more detail, you can, if you want to, go and add them underneath the glow effects. So for example, if I pull this one down, to just above the first W layer and change the blend mode from here to like exclusion, it just interacts with things a little bit differently. You can also go to image and adjustments and add curves to any of these textures to increase or decrease the intensity of the texture. I'm not going to cover the texturing bit too much because it's all just going to depend on what kind of image you're working on and what kind of output you're looking for. And if you didn't opt for chromatic aberration, you can just add a hue saturation layer, tick colorize and turn the saturation up to whatever color you like really, but I'm going to leave that off for now. Now you've added the VHS textures. These are like the effects that would be inside the screen, if you like. It's been a little bit since I made these, and I've just had like a week's break from graphic design. So my memory is a bit hazy, but basically I made these textures with effects like chromatic noise, contrast modulation, and other effects that go into emulating VHS style like glitches and CRT noise and stuff like that. So these textures can be used to add the effects, like I said, that is inside the screen, the hypothetical screen we're sort of working on here. Once you've got that bit done, if you go to the scanner trash textures that I told you to download at the beginning, you can pull one of these on and choose a blend mode. And because the scanner trash 2 textures are created with like smudged, dusty, dirty acetate film with very subtle scan lines, it can serve as our screen texture. So if the glow and the chromatic aberration and the VHS textures are what is going on inside your screen, that's behind the glass. And then if you wanted, the scanner trash texture can be the glass on this hypothetical TV that we're like working on. If you followed this all the way through, at this stage you have got the original dithered image from the last tutorial, which is inside a smart object that has all your chromatic aberration channels. You've got 3 displacement maps that you've used that are all still editable because you saved the PSD files and you didn't name something stupid. Maybe you did, but hopefully not. And you've got the glow setup that has its own threshold control, and you've got the textures that match the displacement maps and the screen texture on top. So that means at any time if you want to come back to this effect, you can like fully deconstruct this, hopefully for your sake, without having to rewatch this video. But if you have to rewatch the video, I get another view, so that's cool. But yeah, I'm trying to put more effort into explaining things on the videos that you can save and come back to and like re-edit and work in like over and over again, rather than just here's some cool textures. I don't know. So yeah, just for fun, I'm just going to save that now, and I'm going to run through, let me see if I can do anything cool with this like mouth image that I've got. So let me just, I'm probably going to cut some of this, but just while I'm doing this, I've pre-recorded this video and like 3 others. So I don't know what the like initial reception is to me actually putting effort in with YouTube now. But this video has like a script and references, and obviously free downloads that come with it and sources that I'll link in the description. And it does take a lot of time, especially to edit. This one's going to take a little bit to edit. So if you can share this with like any of your creative friends or interact with the video, I would really appreciate it. It does really help. I also just wanted to mention somewhere that I know that I've been like leaning pretty heavily into the context in this one and the dithering video, and the main reason I do that is just because I've kind of been able to learn the rules for this stuff and then like develop a style from there by breaking those rules. I know that the work that I've done in this style is not like groundbreaking work, but what I mean is I believe that before you can do anything interesting like in whatever art style you're working in, you have to like understand the way to do it properly before you can do it your own way. And like I really think like the context matters for like the analog chromatic aberration stuff, and the dithering context if you watch that video as well. I know that it's not everyone's like favorite part of the video, and I know that like a lot of the time when I watch tutorials online, all the comments will be if it's someone who just gets straight into how to create something, a lot of the comments will be like, thanks for not talking for 10 minutes before the tutorial started or whatever. And I know I've done a lot of that in this one and the last video. So yeah, if you sit through that stuff, I appreciate it, but I do think it pays off to know where your work is coming from. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm actually quite surprised at how well the Doja Cat one came out, because I didn't actually test this before. I just wrote the script here, which you might have seen me reading through this video, and I just wrote kind of what I thought I would do, and yeah, it came out really cool. I really like this piece. So if you were one of the people that asked me to create a Photoshop version of Glitch Machine, that's kind of this for you. After Effects is much better for almost all of what we covered in this video, unfortunately. So if you do want to take this stuff to the next level, I would recommend Glitch Machine, but that's totally up to you. As always, any feedback and support is much appreciated. This tutorial was heavily requested for months, So yeah, I know I take a while sometimes, but if you ask for something, I will eventually do it. All the links are in the description for everything I've spoke about today. Like I said, share this if you have creative friends. It really, really helps. And other than that, I will see you in the next one.